Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ryan Mujan, host of Cowtown Movie Classics, and today we are closing out this fabulous exhibit, Moving Pictures, Karl Struss and the Rise of Hollywood, with perhaps one of his greatest achievements as a cinematographer, certainly one of the finest examples of silent cinema to ever be committed to film. From 1927, it is director FW Murnau's Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans. Joining me tonight is a wonderful film historian, author, and very good friend, Mr. Stan Shaffer. How are you doing today, Stan?
I'm fine, Ryan. Good afternoon. I'm looking forward to this. This is one of the greatest movies, as you said. And I love just the whole title, Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans, because that's what it really explains everything. It explains Murnau and his sense of visual acuity and how a song itself, I like to say Sunrise is a poem, but a song is even better because it's like adding music to the lyrics of the poem. And that's what we see when how Murnau works his beauty with Janet Gaynor, George O'Brien, and of course the beautiful cinematography of Karl Struss.
No, absolutely. And I think for the people in the audience who've never seen a silent film before, you might have certain expectations going in. You know, it's 2024. We're a very sophisticated audience. You can look at something and say, oh, this movie is very artificial. It's phony. It's fake. But, you know, certainly that was not the intention of the filmmaker. To me, it's a very wonderful, stylized work of art.
There's a dreamlike quality to it. And so that takes it away from anything people say about any kind of century it may be in. It's a dreamlike quality. We see that even when he starts with about the city and he first introduces Margaret Livingston. And we have the city, how it is a little claustrophobic, but there's all darkness to it. So we know that this woman is trouble. She's the city woman, played by a woman named Margaret Livingston, who, besides this movie, her other claim to fame would be when the Canary Murder Case was made, one of the first sound movies, Louise Brooks couldn't do her own voice, and Margaret Livingston provided the voice. So that's her other claim to fame, besides being this evil woman who leads George O'Brien into sin. And of course, we know sin is always a city. We don't know what city. It could be Gotham City, but it's a city.
Yeah, well, it certainly looks like Gotham City, and that is something wonderful about the film. You know, if you look at the cast list, it's George O'Brien as the man, Janet Gaynor as his wife, and then you have Margaret Livingston, the woman from the city. And we don't know, like you said, we don't know what city it is. What I like about it is, you know, Murnau and Struss are dealing in themes that are very universal. It could be Berlin, it could be Chicago, it could be New York City, but it doesn't matter. You know, here we are almost 100 years later, and these themes are still relatable. They're still identifiable with the modern audience.
Going along with what you said about the boy, the girl, the city woman, no one has a character name in it. You know, there's the maid, there's the friend, no one has a character name. So it's a good thing. It makes it all work even more. And, you know, and then when you do with Struss's beautiful cinematography, and he did win the Academy Award, the first Academy Award for it. And actually, it was the first Academy Award ceremony. So Janet Gaynor was the first for Best Actress. And the movie itself won a very unique award, the only time it was given, and that was for artistry, for unique artistry and visual style. And that was for Sunrise. Murnau was a big deal because he had been a huge success in the German Expressionistic period. And William Fox brought him over because William Fox thought, okay, this is what we need to do. We want to do more. You know, silent movies were the thing. It had reached the real peak of its art now. And they were beautiful movies. Beautiful movies in 27, 28 was one of the major parts where silent movies reached the artistry that they were hoping it would do. And Murnau was a major portrait giver. Beautiful, beautiful work.
Oh, of course. No, sorry. I was just going to say for our audience who may not be familiar with the name, Friedrich Wilhelm Murnau, I think perhaps his greatest claim to fame. I mean, he was a very prolific director in Germany, but, you know, when I hear that name, FW Murnau, the first film I think of is the 1922 version of NOSFERATU, which is perhaps the first and still one of the greatest vampire movies ever made.
Brilliant. And first adaptation of Dracula, which really he wanted to try to avoid any kind of comparison. But unfortunately for him, Mrs. Stoker, Bram Stoker's widow, was still alive and took him to court. And she got the judge to agree to destroy every print. Thank God she was not successful. They smuggled prints out. And, you know, that might have been to our advantage because some of his earlier works didn't survive. They didn't get smuggled out because there was no danger. So we got NOSFERATU. It's taken many years to restore it, put together bits and pieces from different countries, but today we can look at the restored version and the beautiful work it is.
Which is a miracle. I mean, it's crazy to think we literally have pirating to thank, or else
Yeah,
this amazing cultural artifact, which they're still remaking it and imitating this film even to this day, could have been lost to history.
quite true. And Murnau, of course, had a great catalog of movies from Germany that he'd already done with the great Emil Jannings, who instantly won the first Academy Award for Best Actor that year. Not for anything that Murnau directed, because that was Last Laugh and Faust in Germany, but Emil Jannings won that year that Janet Gaynor won. Now, one thing I want to bring up is with Jannings winning the award, and Jannings was just considered one of the greatest actors. There's a neglect here, and when you see Sunrise, you'll see that a performance right at the foremost, besides that of Janet Gaynor, of course, is George O'Brien. He gives a wonderful performance, and I wanted to mention this. One thing that Murnau did as a director is he told his actors, "Don't act, think." And that's what we see O'Brien doing. And that's what makes it that it's not like what we accept as silent movie acting sometimes, where it's basically overacting. Don't act, think. And we see that. And that adds to what we talk about, the poetry, the song of the movie because of that. And so the cinematography adds the dimension while the actors are thinking what they're doing. Beautiful.
see that he talks and plays just like a Hindu. He made no kiss. That's all they kiss. Now I cannot
Janet Gaynor won the award that year for 3 pictures: this picture, Seventh Heaven, and Street Angel, and went on to a great, great career. Actually, she was nominated later for A Star Is Born, the first official adaptation of that, and she was brilliant. It's still my favorite. I know there's been good jobs done by Judy Garland. Streisand was all right, Lady Gaga, but no, I still love the original William Wellman version with Janet Gaynor, A Star Is Born.
Of course. And, earlier you mentioned this film was sort of the culmination of what filmmakers were able to achieve with the silent film medium. Because 1927, by this time, sound was already on its way in. And my understanding was they had already shot the film in the can, but to capitalize with the rise of talking pictures, they ended up adding a synchronized score. And if you watch the film, like the film we just saw, you can hear those sound effects kind of peppered in to add an extra gimmick to it. But it's almost a shame because you see how beautifully fluid this film is, how the camera moves, the actors' expressions, the very heightened emotions and energy of it. And then you look at some of the talking films made around that same time period. Talking pictures had almost set the industry back a few years because you couldn't move the camera.
At that point, they were quite primitive. And actually, the work that I'm working on is about early talkies. So it's a very much an important part to me. And, like Lillian Gish said, we had the language that everyone could understand. It was the world's language, silent movies. And when we added sound to it, yes, we could hear people talking, but then again, we couldn't all understand each other. And the artistry had built. Lillian Gish was part in Victor Seastrom's The Wind, which is another beautiful movie of that same period. And like you said, Ryan, then what they started doing, starting with Don Juan, is start adding little special effects. So they were experimenting to add sound. And, even The Jazz Singer, known as the first sound movie, really doesn't have much sound in it. It has a song, it has some additive dialogue, but there's not much. But that was the experiment that worked. The audiences went for it. Unfortunately, we lost some of that artistry of the silent movies. And some of that artistry of the silent movies was also because we were bringing in foreign directors like FW Murnau, Victor Seastrom, and they were doing beautiful work here. Well, I want to understand a little more about George O'Brien, because besides what I was talking about right here, John Ford recognized in him, before he even made Sunrise, he made a movie called The Iron Horse for John Ford, which was one of his very first hits. And so Ford would have certain actors that became his actor. Before George O'Brien, there was Harry Carey. After George O'Brien, there was Victor McLaglen, and then John Wayne. So they become the actors that he used over and over again, part of his persona. And George O'Brien was part of that. He was in one of Ford's first sound movies, Salute, which was also the first talking picture John Wayne actually had dialogue in with Ward Bond. But George O'Brien was the star. Later, unfortunately, Fox didn't use him well, and he wound up in great B westerns until Ford resurrected him again, brought him back for Fort Apache, She Wore Your Yellow Ribbon, and the last movie that O'Brien made was Cheyenne Autumn for John Ford. So it came around circle.
Well, George O'Brien's an interesting figure in the silent era and the early talkie era because you look at him, he is in tremendous physical shape. Now we take it for granted, right? We watch the Marvel superhero movies, you see guys like Chris Evans, Hugh Jackman. I mean, we take it for granted that a leading man is supposed to be ripped, but you look for 1927, he's in incredible shape, and I think he resembles Ryan Gosling in a lot of ways.
He certainly was, and George O'Brien, he actually, when he was young, actually posed for Beefcake Pictures. But, and at that point you had leading men like William Haynes and Gary Cooper, and they weren't like muscle men. O'Brien, you're right. He had the kind of shape that we see now with the gentlemen later like Hugh Jackman and Ryan Gosling, but not back in the late 20s.
So, yeah, but maybe the audience wasn't quite ready for that just yet.
True. Quite true. We had to evolve, I guess. Well, Tarzan was right around the corner.
Right. Well, when I think of George O'Brien, too, another film which was made around the same time, 1928, was it 26 or 28 when he did Noah's Ark for Michael Curtiz?
Actually, it's 28. Michael Curtiz. Oh, my word, that movie. People died making that movie. That's when Curtiz got his reputation of being a sadist. And Noah's Ark was a part talkie and co-starred Dolores Costello. But you're right, that was George O'Brien's other major contribution in late silent era.
Yeah, I love those early silent biblical epics, literally with the cast of thousands. Speaking of that, Karl Struss, and of course he's credited alongside a co-cinematographer Charles Rocher. Now, were you able to find any information, like who contributed what to the film? It's very unusual for a film to have two directors of photography.
Well, at that point, I think Rocher was actually the more had more experience at that point. And Struss is, I think, and I'm not totally sure about this. When I saw the titles, Rocher actually had larger print than Struss. So that meant that he had, even though they both shared the Oscar and went on to different careers, Struss went on to a Paramount career, and Rocher went on to an MGM career, and they both did all kinds of, later on, Struss was actually even doing movies like She-Devil, and then Rocher was making movies right up to the end also.
No, certainly. And, shortly before making Sunrise, Karl Struss was the director of photography on the original Ben-Hur: A Tale of the Christ. Talk about a cast of thousands. That's an incredible film with some very early, and it actually has some very early two-strip Technicolor photography in it.
Absolutely. And, it is interesting, and I don't have an answer for that as to why the two were on this, especially two that already had a great background, because I don't want to put down Struss's background, because he also had worked on Mary Pickford's movies like Sparrows. Mary Pickford was the greatest star in the world, so he actually had a great reputation. But with Murnau coming in and Murnau's visual style, Fox must have felt he wanted to make sure everything was perfect and brought in two great artists to work with Murnau, who was a great artist himself.
Absolutely. They were the right men for the job. Now, like you said, Struss would certainly go on to a very diverse and I would say illustrious career, because when we look at those films he made in the 1930s, I know we're both classic horror fans. He was the director of photography on Reuben Williams' Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in 1931, The Island of Lost Souls with Charles Laughton, 1932-33. I mean, these are just some incredible films. And one of my favorite movies of all time, Cecil B. DeMille's The Sign of the Cross.
Oh, yes, and also DeMille's Four Frightened People the same year.
Yeah.
So that was part of his whole Paramount contract. He went on to make 3 movies with Mae West. He had the Paramount stuff happening, and Mae also, of course, like all the major female stars, wanted to make sure great cinematographers were behind there, and so he became one of her favorites.
Mm-hmm. He was certainly a very immaculate artist, and I'm glad the Amon Carter Museum was able to provide such a wonderful showcase of his life and career, because I just feel like, especially directors of photography even now, but especially then, I feel like they don't get the credit they deserve.
No, you're certainly right. They do need more credit because they are the man behind the camera, and the camera records the soul of the picture. Karl Struss, well, what a long career. So I can't add any more thoughts on that, except that that's a testament that he was able to go through the whole studio system and still move on to independent pictures later. He was in demand until he decided to retire. It was always his decision. Mm-hmm. And as for Murnau, wrapping up Murnau, it's just such a shame that Murnau died at a young age in a horrible accident, and it denied us many things. So I think he would have made the transition to sound without any problem and would have added his visual delicacies.
Absolutely. I mean, it certainly was a tragedy. Now, it was only a few years, right? Was it 1931? He got in a car accident?
Yes.
Yeah.
There are many legends about it that I don't even want to go into. But yes, it was a horrible. And, and then he died then. Only 11 people showed up for the funeral. And, of course, those people included Greta Garbo. She was there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's certainly a shame. But, it's a testament to his skill as an artist, as a storyteller, essentially, that here we are, again, almost 100 years later, and we're still finding new secrets. We're still examining his films and discovering new things, and really appreciating them for the works of art that they are.
A brilliant storyteller. That's the best way to put it for him and for the help that he had with his cinematographers. Absolutely.
All right, so for anyone in the audience who may be unfamiliar with your work, is there anything you're working on right now you want the audience to know about?
Well, I'm working on a book presently on the early talkies, really taking them from 1928 to 1934 when the code comes into effect. I won't say it's just a pre-code because it does deal with the early talkies. The code was in 1930 but wasn't enforced until 34. So it's a book that's going to be essays on the people who worked on them and capsules of over 1,000 movies made during that period.
Well, I know I'm certainly looking forward to it. Once again, Mr. Stan Shaffer, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ryan.
If you're in the audience, I hope you enjoyed today's film as much as we did. Once again, my name is Ryan Bijan. We'll see you next time.